Good morning and welcome. My name is Jeffrey Gallo. I'm a senior VP with CPA firm Grennan Fender here in Orlando, and I'm your host for the next 60 minutes with the stated purpose of informing you here in some of the highlights of a successful Central Florida business and how this family business handled the whole preparation and transition process with a large third-party buyer. Second thing is inspiring you with some insights, stories, experiences that transpired during this process. Thirdly, connecting you to some really cool guys, and you'll see that in just a moment, in a relaxed conversation. And then fourth, encouraging you. During this time, the proverbial light at the end of the tunnel, it's not a train, and we can both survive and prosper. So, as you know, this is CEO Leadership Forums, and we're an organization of about 25 companies. You see that there. And our mission is specifically to facilitate a strategic partnership between Valencia College or students and local businesses in providing CEOs access to an excellent talent pool, CEO level education like you're going to see here, and mastermind opportunities, while providing scholarships to students to advance their careers. As a matter of fact, in the last few years, we've raised about $150,000 for that purpose. Okay. I just want to say here that we're going to be talking about some things, and this is for all the lawyer folks out there, that if we get into anything that has to do with legal, it is not our intention to speak law here. These are the opinions of the speakers, and for your own situation, you want to seek out your own professional advisors. We have a plethora of them in the CEO Leadership Forums group, so feel free to reach out at any time. Okay. Some housekeeping. A follow-up email is going to be sent out after the webinar concludes with an experience survey. And I'm going to ask, when you leave here, you're going to be prompted, to go to a Survey Monkey. It's got 8 little questions. It take you 30 seconds. Your feedback is valuable. But you will also get an email with a video recording and the PDF file of the PowerPoint. I will remind you, this is going to be a free-flowing experience. So if you have any questions, we have a Q&A box and the chat box. Please do send those through the Q&A box as you are able. Our next webinar is going to be scheduled for probably the last week of July, first part of August, so be on the lookout for that. Okay. We've had a tremendous response to all of our webinars. This, I think, is our 10th one in the last few months. And we're going to offer several more going forward. I think just the responses have been fantastic, and the speakers really, really dynamic. So first one up, Jonathan Molayem, who is the president of Acquivest Financial Group. He is going to be facilitating this whole conversation with our special guest, Mark Simmons. John is the president of Orlando-based M&A advisory firm, Acquivest Financial, and he established the firm back in 2004 and has been recognized as one of the top business intermediaries in Florida. He's worked extensively across many industries, including business services, manufacturing, distribution, financial services, and hospitality. Please welcome John. Great to see you, man.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you all for tuning into this. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to let everyone know that we will have 2 polling questions that'll be prompted throughout the presentation. And when it's working correctly, it's going to pop up on your screen without having to do anything. And you're going to have about 45 seconds to answer these 2 questions. So please participate in that. And then you'll see the results. We'll talk about the results briefly after. So be on the lookout for that. I'm real pleased to share one of Central Florida's many homegrown entrepreneurial success stories here. You've likely seen an amazing pictures store at one point in your life. It'd be interesting to hear where they all emanated, but we'll talk about that later. There's so much beyond the stores that you'll learn. I'd like to introduce you all to Mark Simmons, CEO of Colorvision International and Amazing Pictures. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, Mark, please share with everyone what Colorvision does, where it does it, and a bit about the history of the company, which goes back longer than 40 years ago.
Yeah, it sure does. Colorvision opened its doors back in 1977 when my father, the ultra entrepreneur, and my mother, who was really the backbone of our family, they started the company in 77 and out of our house in Longwood. I mean, our garage was our warehouse, and my sister's room that she moved out of was our corporate headquarters. So we started with a black and white system back in 1977, and impact printer, real loud, and at the Central Florida Fair right here in Orlando. And both my sisters are still involved in the company. Marilyn is our oldest sibling. She's our CFO, and Diane is our VP of HR resources, or human resources. And of course there's me. I started at the lowest position in 1988 as a sales associate. So, and I worked my way up through the company from that point forward. So.
Well, some of you may know that there has been a recent transaction that has taken place, actually consummated in the middle of this crisis. A lot of interesting things to talk about that I think a lot of CEOs will find interesting and relatable. Mark, would you mind sharing when you first became familiar with the eventual buyer, and then talk about the nature of the relationship, how it developed, and what the first time that you discovered that they had an interest in your business?
It really is an interesting path that happened in that regard. We had actually been in contact with the ultimate buyer for quite a while. Dynippon, it was one of our suppliers. So being in the printing business in theme parks and such, we use a lot of printers, and Dynippon is the manufacturer of those printers. We were actually with Sony printers for quite a long time, and they bought Sony. And when they bought Sony, a little bit of a light bulb went off in my head back then that maybe they were interested in the M&A process. So anyway, we went to Japan, and when we went there, we had some conversations with DNP, who is our printer supplier, and basically we had great conversations about our synergies and about what they're trying to accomplish and what we accomplish. I mean, we take, our global corporation takes over 600 million images a year, and worldwide. So they want to sell prints, they want to sell media. So which we do too. But when the cell phones and everything came out, we started packaging more things towards actual digital packages. So that got us more involved with the cell phones and apps and things like that, and packaging things up so guests get all their photos for the day instead of picking out, one or two experiences that really intrigue them to purchase. So, Dynippon is a fantastic. They're traded on the Nikkei. Great organization, $15 billion company.
I think they're 130 years old too, right?
Yeah, 130 something years old,
yeah.
and great people all the way through the structure. I mean, from the guy that's a VP that's reporting to the board of DNP. He took us to dinner. We had such a great time and such a great dialogue, and that's really what's kind of solidified their interest in purchasing us. So don't go cheap on the dinners, guys. You know, it's very important that you make those connections.
Hey, if you don't mind me butting in, but
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of the listeners have an understanding how hard it is to get into a theme park. You know, they're all publicly traded companies, subsidiaries, and in some cases, it's decades of building that relationship to get in. I don't know if a lot of our viewers understand where your technology is currently stationed worldwide. Might be interesting to share.
Okay, well, so inside the United States, we're with all the major theme parks. We're with Universal Studios, with Disney, SeaWorld, Six Flags, Cedar Fair. They're all great companies that we do business with in various different ways, whether it be through licensing or through operations. Many of the companies, it has been very difficult. And if it wasn't for my parents laying down such a strong track record, that it allowed us to have these conversations with these really giant companies. They are really big. And
how far back did Dick originally engage with the theme parks to get a store on the campus?
Well, that was back in the early 80s. Our first major theme park was Six Flags over Georgia. That was our first. It's not a major theme park. But it is a big or a major theme park group. All right. So each one of their silos of theme parks are more individual, like more regional in nature. Whereas when we finally got into Universal Studios in the mid 80s, Universal Studios Hollywood was our first major theme park. Those locations were very difficult. It took a lot of phone calls by my father and my mother. Most of the time, my mother had to clean up whatever my father said. So my dad would say something and my mom would have to go smooth it over a little bit. But that's the way the business is, family business. That is.
And so fast forwarding to the last year or so, we'll get a bit further into the aspects of the selling process, and especially how COVID might have disrupted or changed some of that. But Jeff, can we start the first polling question? Let's prompt that, and then I'll ask the question to y'all. There it is.
There it is.
All right. So the question: what is the biggest concern you have regarding the idea of selling your business? And there are multiple choices. Jeff, are you able to select a couple or just one? Just one. Okay. So everyone pick your top concern that you have in that process. It'll be real interesting to hear how that comes out. Jeff, just let us know when.
Yeah, we have about 15 more seconds.
Okay. If I were to guess,
a couple more.
First one is not receiving enough cash up front, but let's see how it comes.
Okay,
out.
there it goes. Sharing the results.
There it is. So number one is predicted, not receiving enough cash up front. Cash is king. And then will my employees be taken care of, which is a big one. And establishing, maintaining a personal legacy. I think when you first start the process, Mark, let me know what you think, but those are kind of the first things you think about in the beginning, before starting the process. And then as you're in the process, some of these other things become more important, such as reps and warranties and the exposure to that. personal employment, retirement arrangement, thinking about what you're going to do after. It all kind of bubbles up in the middle of the process or in the end of the process, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's unbelievable what goes through your mind when you're going through this process. I mean, the ceiling fan was my friend at night as I was going through all these questions, looking up and wondering if I'll ever get any sleep. But yeah, all these questions or all these answers, these results are all valid, very valid, and they're valid from different points of view. You know, if you're in a family-run business, especially one that was started by, you know, your parents or whatever, it changes your perspective on how you think of things. If you started it yourself, it's one thing, but if it's started by somebody else, very different thought process.
It's a great point. At what point in the process in your courting from this buyer that you decided to explore seeking M&A advisory support, and what were the specific areas of concern that you and perhaps your sisters had at the early stage?
Well, you know, as you know, John, you and I have had a relationship for quite a while now, and you and I have had many discussions of this very topic. You know, I've jumped in, I've jumped out, I've jumped in, I've jumped out, and interest and but when a real deal presented itself, like it did with DNP, I knew from the, you know, after talking to my dad, you know, my dad passed away 10 years ago, but I had a lot of conversations with him regarding this. And I knew at the very beginning of the process that I would probably be in a little bit over my head. I mean, I'm already carrying, you know, the president badge and the CEO badge, and you know, I'm already doing a big job, and I have a great staff underneath me that really supports me in every way you can think of. But I still knew it was more than what I do on a daily basis. This is going to take me off in a totally different process. And I know some of this depends on how large your company is, how complex it is. Mine is old. It's over 40 years old. So we have a lot of due diligence to go through. So I kind of suspected that would be a problem. So I'd rather saddle a guy like you, John, with some of this stuff than me take it all on myself, right? So and you were fantastic through the process. I mean, you held my hand very well through the whole process. And I also knew that I didn't have to find a buyer. I'm bringing the buyer to the table. So I just needed somebody that was there, that was knowledgeable about the actual process, because I've never done it before. I've never been through this process before. I knew it was a deep process and a challenging process at that. A lot more challenging at the end of it than I really thought it would ever be. So.
You mentioned having a great team and great support team, but it must have been frustrating when you're not able to utilize the vast majority of those resources for assistance, as only a select few people were aware.
Yeah.
You know, 1,000 people, you know, there were 3 family members, and, you know.
Yeah, we had one employee that's been with us for quite a long time, over 25 years, and he's my right-hand man, and he's fantastic. He was in the know, but being the nature of our business, you know, in our business, everybody knows everybody. Everybody in SeaWorld, you know, a lot of the high positions at all these theme parks, they move back and forth. We have a lot of triggers in our contracts, so we have to be very careful how we present things and what we say. And when you're going down the path, not knowing that there's an end to the path, when do you actually notify people that things are actually going to happen? So including your staff, but also your partners. And so that there was a lot of challenges in that setting.
I mean, it's quite amazing that we were able to go through an extensive process, very invasive due diligence. It really took a lot of time, and we were able to keep it confidential to the employees, but also to the customers. So it was quite.
I mean, we only had 4 employees in that were in the know, and we went through due diligence. So you gotta. Our staff at the home office is about 65 employees, and so only 4 employees were doing the work of, and I'll include you, John, because you did a lot of work too, but really 5 people doing all the heavy lifting in this whole thing. That it was quite challenging. We weren't, the staff at the home office and really the staff, they're our family. So we weren't trying to disrespect them by not telling them. It was just so crucial that the confidentiality aspect stayed confidential to the group, because if the deal doesn't go through, we shouldn't have worried anybody, right? So that was the philosophy.
It's just a substantial disruption when there's a lot of discussion over nothing.
Right.
So you want to start bringing aspects into the mix when it's the appropriate time to do so. And the same thing with other advisors, CPAs, legal team. You bring them in systematically when the time is right. What you don't do is jump into what's the phrase, put the cart before the horse. You everything is done in appropriate time. And I think Mark would agree that, until there's a solid deal, you don't do other things in the process and you kind of do things in its natural order.
Yeah. Yeah. And even then, even after the natural order, then you got to figure out, how are you going to tell your employees, and I went down the path, my path was, I just went down the line of all my key employees, generally my VPs, who have been with us for many, many years, all of them. And I called them personally. Now we're in the age of COVID, right? So I did it just as we're talking right now. I talked to them face to face, but via computer, and told them exactly what happened and what was in store for them. And then I also asked them to think about it and give me all the questions that they have about this whole transition and how it impacts them personally. And it was a back and forth for a little bit, and we got through it.
I have to share a funny moment happened a while back when we had an entourage of 30, 40 team members from DNP Japan. Well, Japan, Europe, New York, and the Carolinas all congregated over to Orlando. We had to take these entourages around, some of the theme parks, as well as the home office, and not have anyone wonder what the heck's going on.
Well, we also did it after hours at the home office. So, but in the theme parks,
split into 2 groups too. I mean, because it was a large entourage, and and if you think you have 60, 70 people in the home office, there's always a chance that one person's lingering after hours. I mean, in a tech company, it's unusual that people work some long hours. So it was just a crazy moment that, looking back, it's just funny to think about.
Well, it's funny because here we are post transaction, And I get emails from those guys that were in that original entourage. Well, that was like 2 years ago, right? I mean,
No,
that was like 2 years
it was
ago. And,
last summer.
and the guys would write me. They'll write me out of the blue, and they'll be like, "Hey, this is Koike-san, and I just wanted to ask you a couple questions." And I'm like, he goes, "Well, we met in Orlando," and I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry." You know, I mean, so, but yeah, that was a very interesting ride to go through the process.
Well, yeah, Mark, let's talk about some of the major challenges that you came across. I mean, we touched on some of it, but is there anything that you want to bring up as a major challenge through the process?
Yeah.
Kept you up at night, and how did we collectively work through them?
Well, it's a long process for us. Mainly, I think because we're dealing with a major publicly traded company, and an international publicly traded company on the Nikkei. We were also challenged with being a 40-year company. So there was a lot of due diligence that had to happen on their part. And it was just such a long process. It was a long process. Some of the points within the whole deal that I set in my mind, which were extremely important, was hiring not just the right law firm, but hiring the right people in that law firm. Because there's a lot of law firms out there that might not be right for a transaction, but they might have specific people that are perfect for your transaction. And I think we found that. We had a really strong legal team, I felt. And as you know, the sky's the limit when it comes to the legal. So you got to be careful there. And I highly recommend, maybe thinking about how to put a cap on your legal services when you're going through that process for anybody who's thinking about doing this. Pandemic obviously was a major issue in this whole thing. As we're running down the hill and we're getting really close to closing the transaction, and kaboom, a pandemic hits, and every single one of my stores were closed in the middle of the transaction. That doesn't create a lot of happy thoughts, I'm sure, to the other side as to, and still we're going through it, right? From a theme park standpoint. Specifically, a couple of challenges for me were personally, one was really difficult, is one of our larger customers that had a change of control provision in their contract. They came back. There's a lot of legalese in there, but I don't really want to get into all of it. But it was very difficult to get them to sign off, and thankfully, I had some very good contacts within the organization that helped push the change of control provision through. And because a lot of the contracts have to be redone when there is a change of control. So we got some sign-offs there. That was extremely important. Another big major challenge that happened is, after working this whole process with the gentleman from Japan, who is on the board on the whole organization of DMP, on March 31st, we were supposed to close on April 1st, and we ended up closing on April 7th. On March 31st, the gentleman wrote me an email telling me that he had resigned from the whole corporation, and he was my main contact for the whole transaction. So
the main driver.
He was the main driver on their side in Japan. And that was a very nerve-wracking moment for me. Very difficult to get through. A lot of thoughts going through my head. I made some really good decisions at that point, and I got in contact with the person replacing him over numerous emails, and we got the deal done on April 7th. And we ended up backdating it to April 1st, which is perfect for me. You know, I love April 1st. It's probably one of my favorite days.
I guess I'll share the toughest thing for me, and I've done business with Japan and China in the past, but just dealing with that 12, 13-hour time difference for any kind of calls, any kind of decisions. You know, you would come up with a decision. We would work on and come up with a decision on something one afternoon, and then we would relay it over to the other side, and they would get that email maybe way late in the evening that day, but then they have to consult with their American consultants, which don't operate until the next morning. So although you know, by the time it's 9 o'clock Eastern, it's already late evening in Japan again. So it's just amazing the amount of back and forth with decision making when you're dealing with a public company on the other side of the globe.
Yeah, well, that is my life now. So so I live that world all the time now. I mean, I'm part of the board for Colorvision now, and our meetings take place at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you know, of course, a board meeting, I can get decisions based right on that meeting, but sometimes it has to go to a different place, and people have to, you know, talk more about what needs to be done. And so it might take 24, 48 hours before we can actually act. So it's okay though. Everybody is, they're a great group. They really are. I'm very, very pleased being with them.
I mean, a lot of the big decisions you run into or, you know, require a lot of, you know, months and months of deliberation and thought, team thought. So, I mean, nothing, thankfully, after the deal's been done, has to really happen at a moment's notice. It's all planning, you know, new parks that are being developed or renovated or built, and just, you know, ready for that. So, I mean, it's just with in the midst of the deal, there's just a lot of back and forth, quick things. So, you know, thankfully, a lot of that's behind us at this point. Right. Jeff, let's go to the next polling question. If you could prompt that, please. This is a little twist on the last question that we had posed. Ah, there it is. So what is the biggest concern you have within the selling process once a deal is in place? So we have confidentiality breaches with customers, with competitors, with employees, and then you have legal aspects of due diligence and closing, and financial aspects of due diligence, buyer potentially retrading the deal, that kind of thing. Or is there something we've missed here? I'm curious to hear what everyone thinks on this one. Mark, what would you pick here?
Well, my first one was is 1, and then I go 3, and then 2.
Customers,
employees, and then competitors. You know, I mean, for us, competitors, once they get a whiff that you're in a transaction of some sort, the first thing they'll do is knocking on doors of my customers. You know, that's exactly what they're going to do.
And that's where customer diversification is. I think that the more diversified your customer base is, the less it becomes a real concern, I would think.
Agreed.
Legal aspects of due diligence and closing.
Wow.
Well, I think that, you know, the reps and warranties category. We spent many of hours and review with counsel to make sure that there was no improper recourse. Especially with COVID, you have to really nail things down and going forward. So indemnification, it becomes real relevant. So thank you all. We're at our last few comments, questions here. Before we start looking at any questions you all have, if you have any questions that you'd like to post to Mark, please post it so we can start looking at that. Question I have is, do you have any advice, a couple big pointers that you'd like to offer to other business owners thinking about selling?
Yeah, from my, I'm going to go from my perspective. A couple of the big major factors that I had to consider because of the family nature of my business. I mean, as I was telling you guys, my sisters are both involved, my nephew, my son, my aunt, these people have been, and they've been with the organization for a long time. So, so the major factors for me might be different than for you, but you really need to go through the process of really being true and honest to yourself, what is important to you if you're going to go through this process. But number one was the legacy of my family. We've been in the industry for over 44 years. And it was important for me to protect my mom and dad's legacy. Two, I would say would be, what position are my family members in, not just in the company, but also financially, everything else. Are they in, what position are they in after the deal is closed? And then the overall deal on how it impacts my current employees, because remember, I consider most of my employees my family. I've known them for as long as, as our family. When my dad started the company, I was 12 years old. So I've known a lot of these people been here since, inception or close to, 20, 30 years. So, so that was very important to me, considering those key aspects.
Was there anything specific that you would have done differently during the process? You did touch on the length of time.
Yeah, and that's probably for me, it was the biggest one. It's a fairly stressful process because again, it's added on to your current role. It's another job. I think once the framework is built for the transaction, so from due diligence and everything else, once that is all kind of like packed up, I think personally, I know you pushed hard, John, in the whole transaction, but I wish I would have, because I could have made the call directly to the guys in Japan and said, look, we need to get things done. And then that would have kept the deal from getting pushed into COVID and everything else. It would have kept the deal out of that mess. But then I mean, obviously nobody saw COVID coming, but the addition to COVID really put a lot of stress on the deal. But I really wish I would have been a little more firm on saying, okay, let's wrap this piece up. Let's move forward. We need to get to the next line. And I wish I would have, navigated that a little bit better myself.
Yeah, I think that, we started really diving into tax implications. And I think the earlier you get into that conversation with your CPA, I think that's a generally a wise move. I know
Yeah.
we had numerous discussions over that. And then toward the end, the employment agreement is something that probably the discussion over employment.
Yeah.
And I know we tried our best to expedite that, but that's something that you don't want to let that drag out as long as it did too. You would probably agree with.
Well, there's a lot of things going on at the same time, and you've got COVID going on. You've got discussions of the closing of the deal. You've got your own employment agreement, along with others, because I have to deal with everybody's employment agreement, including my own. And it was a lot to really get through. And I probably was a little more lenient on my employment agreement as I fought for my employees, because I'm getting the benefit of the transaction of the selling of the company. So I was probably a little less aggressive on my own employment agreement and a lot more aggressive on theirs. That's how I felt.
Which is a common occurrence. And I'm not really sure what you can really do to protect yourself from any issues there, other than to try to broach the subject as early as possible in the process.
Right.
Because, and I know we were trying to, pin down who would require employment agreements that were not owners. And, sometimes buyers don't know who is integral part of the business until they do a certain amount of their due diligence. So it's one of those things that's you have to wait for them to, perform their HR due diligence to understand who requires employment agreements. And then when you finally know who that is, it can always change. So it's just one of those things you want to keep pushing the action forward. Along with everything else. We were, like any of these deals, you juggle with a variety of different due diligence teams, anything from HR to legal to financial to insurance to environmental to handling the leases. And it just all has to happen all at the same time. And Mark only has to run a company in the meantime. And his sisters, they all have their jobs. So it's a lot of juggling. Jeff, I'm not able to see from my screen any questions. Do you see any questions that you want to pull out here?
Yeah. So there was one in the chat going back to. Let's see here. Bear with me because I'm going back here. One, did you need, Mark, you had mentioned that you spoke with each individual VP, each key person that was non-family. Of course, the family was a separate conversation, but did you need to provide any kind of assurance to those key people to keep them with you? Was there some kind of stay bonus that you needed to offer, or was this pure faith?
Well, some of it was faith. Some of it was faith. They've been with us a long time. There is a bonus for key employees, a separate key bonus. The problem with the bonus is it comes out of earnout, and so so everybody has stayed knowing that there's not much chance of some of that because of COVID. Having a lot of stores closed, it's hard to hit your financial goals.
But it's stretched out over a period of time that would offer more future upside. So,
well, you know what? I just got a text message from Jim, and he was asking, did the employees' comp change drastically when negotiating the new employment agreement, or was it pretty much similar?
Everything has remained the same. Nothing has has changed for the employees. Nothing has changed for our customers. That is one of the main drivers from DNP. They kept pushing that nothing is changing as far as the organization. There's only a change in control, but the control is not changing any efforts that Colorvision is currently working on. So
got it. So here, this is a question that I had. If the transaction had not gone through, right? How would that have changed your own situation? A lot of businesses apply for PPP, EIDL, Main Street funding, things like that. In this environment right now, is it the parent that's keeping things moving? I'm curious what the growth plan looks like in this environment. What in the back room with all your key executives, what does the growth plan look like if things open up, if things quasi open up, something like that? And then how does that affect your earnout?
Oh yeah, it's extremely impactful to that. But so we were working all these lines of like we touched on before, from working on the deal to working on employment agreements and everything else. But we were also working on PPP and applying for those, even though it was happening so close together. But I told our guys, I'm like, we've got to keep everything moving in case the deal does not go through. It's extremely important that we're ready if the deal falls through. I totally expected the deal to either fall apart or the pessimist side of me came out and said that if the deal does not go through, what are we doing here? And so we were working those channels as well as working the deal at the same time. So it was a lot of work. The deal goes through, then the parent company doesn't qualify because it's an international company, and they don't qualify for the PPP. So now it's more of a funding to get through, and then looking for light at the end of the tunnel, hopefully in 2021. Hopefully we get this thing squared away, because 60% of our business happens in the summer months of June, July, August, and a little bit of September. So when that gets shut down, it makes things a little lean. So we're gonna, but these DNP has great vision, and they expect great things for years to come, and we're going to help make that happen. So
to touch on that, I would say that we ought to thank your banker for on the bat for you, until we get everything done, because I'm sure it was pretty challenging from the banking side to see what was going on. But
yeah, that was SunTrust, by the way, and I've had some issues with them in the past, but they were fantastic going through this process. They really were, and they stuck by us, and they didn't have to, and but they did.
That's a totally unpaid plug that just organically happened here today. So
yeah. Yeah, so they were fantastic helping us out, and we have a great relationship with them, obviously. Unfortunately, because we're an international company, we don't have a whole lot of business to do with them right now. So so we're working through that. We're trying to do credit cards through them and things like that, of that nature, for expenses. But
well, I have a question here. How do you see the future? It kind of piggybacks on Jeff's question, but what do you see going forward? With attractions, theme parks, the momentum. Obviously, U.S. has it pretty tough, but you're a worldwide organization now, and there are certain areas that are pretty clear.
Well, I can't speak for the theme parks themselves, and nor would I want to. They have some significant challenges with this disease without any kind of vaccine available yet. And then these new outbreaks and the way the media handles them, I don't know. I don't want to talk too much about that, but the theme parks have some significant challenges. They're handling very well. They're keeping people separated. They're keeping people wearing masks. Wearing masks does not help my business of taking photos of people together. Separation doesn't help either. And separation from characters does not help, when you have to stand 6 feet away from Shrek to have your photo taken with them. So there's some significant challenges in that arena, but we're handling them. We're trying to fight through them. We can handle some of it through technology and green screens, and like what we're doing right now is, I had a background on me before, but I don't have it on now. And there's things that we can handle with technology, but the guest ultimately still needs to get excited about what they're buying. And so we're still facing that. We're still challenged with that, and we're hoping that the vaccine comes through very, very soon.
Hey, John, Matt is asking a question of Mark, and it's specific to once you made the decision to sell. Okay, and I'm going to ask first part of the question is you're in business for 44 years. What caused you to sell the family business versus keep it in the family? 1, 2, how did you strategically prepare for this? I mean, outside consultants, did you have special folks in addition to John to help improve profitability, financial outlook, things like that, to get the valuation? And that's the third piece, the valuation. How did you get to a point where you understood, okay, this is the right valuation versus perhaps the first offer that they may have made to you may have been lowballed? I'm just curious how you got to that point.
Well, I'll let John handled a lot of the back and forth on that piece. But I'll say that there was very big contributing factors to us wanting to go through a transaction. Both my sisters are older than me, so they're very close to wanting to retire. So that was a driving force in this whole thing, because I personally couldn't afford to buy them out of their shares. I mean, I probably could have. I could have, went through a couple different processes and bank loans and so on, but I decided not to do that. But as far as the valuation, I'm going to let John handle all that, because he handled all of it. And he instructed me, and he gave me what I should expect. So.
Well, as soon as Mark came back from his visit to Japan and confirmed that they were interested, we took a few months to do just that, to dive into the valuation. So we did a pretty detailed financial model, and we had to look at where the business has been and also where the business is projected to go. Looking at pipeline, looking at the percent likelihood that you'll close certain accounts and when. So pretty detailed financial model. Obviously, it's all based on a certain level of expectations, but we also factored in the relationship that DNP had as the major supplier of the company, and tried to figure out strategic benefits. So when we did the valuation / financial model, we did it almost customized specifically for this particular buyer. So I think there was a bit more meat on it, and when we came up with a value, it was understood that some of it was based on historical results and some of it's based on what's to happen in the future. And I think, you know, when you have a situation like that, you're going to see that a lot of the proceeds that you get at closing on the sale of your company is tied to where you're at right now and where you've been and what you've developed. And then the potential in the future is usually tied to, you know, whether it be earnout or rollover equity or those kind of things. And so we really dove into that, you know, with the Simmons family before we dove into negotiations. So we knew in advance what to go after, what to expect, and that kind of thing.
Right.
Got it. We got one other question by text here. Was an employee stock ownership plan option ever on the table, just given the loyalty of your employees?
Yeah, we had thought about that for a while, but there's a, I'm trying to think of the name of the company. It's a huge photo company that did that. They do the school photography. And I didn't like, you know, that they were teetering on bankruptcy for a little bit because of the decisions that were made by their board. And I don't know, I just didn't think that was a valid way to go through the process. I can't give a specific reason. I mean, I went through that process 5 or 6 years ago of thought, and I can't pinpoint exactly why I pulled away from that way of thinking at this point. My apologies for not having an exact answer on that one, but.
Okay.
I think if we were to dive into it further, you know, employee stock ownership models are really driven by the cash flow. And when you have a company that's more CapEx oriented or software oriented, sometimes the value is found from the revenue and the strategic value and implications there. So a lot of software companies tend to not be viable candidates for ESOPs until they start, you know, becoming a major cash cow, because then the banks will come in and fund a meaningful amount of the deal to where the exiting owners get something to make it worthwhile. So it depends on the expectations of the owners, but I think that in this case, you would have by far gotten more proceeds at closing doing it this way than doing it the other way. So if we were to dive into that seriously, that's probably what would have been the result. But it's often the result for a lot of deals, you know, until you get to a certain size. So we're about out of time here. Jeff, do you want to wrap us up?
Thing. Well, first of all, that's the fastest 60 minutes I think I've been involved in. Thank you so much. As I mentioned at the beginning, a follow-up email with some links to the video recording and the PowerPoint is going to be sent out in the next day or so. Certainly take a minute to answer our experience survey. It'll take 30 seconds. And we have our next event is going to be somewhere in the next 3 to 4 weeks. So stay tuned on that. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to John or myself, especially if it's relating to the situation that Mark has gone through. And I know that there's a lot of other anecdotes that Mark has, which we didn't have time to get into, but certainly do reach out to us. I just want to say thank you, John and Mark. You know, the most valuable thing you could give us is time, especially during this time, John and Mark. You know, you're running a business. Things are crazy. A lot of things pulling us in a million directions. Thank you. I got a number of notes from our audience privately, you know, thanking you for some of your wisdom and insights. And lastly, I'd like to thank the audience who is out there. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our program. And until next time, we are done. And thank you so much. Be well.
Thank you.